Good afternoon, YouTube. Presenting free will and the theory of cusps by Warbles on a Lot. Those of you who've seen any of the other 247 clips before this one on my scroll will be aware that I subscribe to what I call a powerful God theory. You'll also be aware that I describe myself as a comparative theologist, and I say that I try to be a faithist. Now, that means that, yeah, I do accept the idea that humans have a soul. I consider that being here on the physical material surface of planet Earth for what we call a lifetime, I regard that as kindergarten for the soul. And I do in fact subscribe to the theory that we're supposed to learn from every incident and every decision that we make. In my way of looking at it, the amount of benevolent synchronicity and beneficial coincidence which is observed in everyday life is orders of magnitude more than can be explained by any theory of recombinant cascading, chance and chaos. Alright? There is more to it than blind chance, in my opinion. And I'd like to share a little bit of a story to illustrate this. It's got to do with bushfire hazard reduction. And as you can see, I live in the sort of situation where worrying about bushfire hazard reduction kind of goes with the territory. Okay? In 1994, when I came up here to live in the lawn locker, there was a drought on, and not the next door neighbour, but the neighbour on the other side of that. Their property caught on fire in about November, I think it was. And one of the local bushfire crews gave me this Firefighting-Backpack so that I could do a few little hazard reduction burns around my place. As you can see, it's been kind of modified because the anchor point for the standard straps had failed, which is why the Bushfire Brigade was giving it away. I've mated the firefighting 16 litre backpack with a Vietnam vintage Australian Army battle pack, so you know, if the Viet Cong commence to shoot at me, I can pull on the tabs and I can dump the excess weight while I go crawling for cover. Interesting feature for a firefighting backpack. I've also patched it with vinyl and epoxy, and I keep it full of water and in pretty good condition just in case I have to use it, as well as the 30 gallons for half an hour, half a minute. I'm as good as a firefighting tanker. Okay, so bush firefighting hazard reduction. Now, I pay rates on 40 hectares or 100 acres. Here's a photocopied enlargement, and we are now here. Alright, we're going to talk about a burn I did that was roughly along here, say 25 acres, solo hazard reduction burn. And I did try to get issued with a drip torch, but I couldn't get one. So you put a hole in the lid of a plastic Coke bottle and you get some steel wool on the end of a bit of fence wire, and you squirt drip torch fuel, which is used sump oil with about 25% petrol. You squirt that onto there, set fire to it, and that gives you an ignition source. Alright, so that's occupying your left and your right hand, and you carry the backpack on your back, and that way you can lay out fuel trails and you can ignite it at your will. And you go out there on successive nights when the weather's right, and for example the 2nd of the 8th was this little patch here, whereas the 3rd of the 8th was up here around the hut, and then what have we got, the 4th of the 8th was up over here, and all of these little patches have all been done. And finally, when I had a dark ring on two sides of it. In the afternoon, when the wind was blowing from the west, as it usually does most of the afternoon, I started lighting up this big area around here. And I came down here and all the way around, and as I got to here, as expected, the sea breeze kicked in and the wind shifted 180 degrees and puffed in from the easterly side. So I came running up around here and made sure that it was all pretty much doing what I wanted to. So the fire was moving in from this side and then it moved in from that side. Okay? So at that point I refilled the backpack and I started off on another lap of the fire. And when I got over here in the easterly breeze, I found an echidna sitting on a rock. And the echidna was terrified, and I had probably 12 or 15 litres of water. And I had the option. I could have wet the echidna down just to make it feel safe and wet the rock around it. That would have been the selfless thing to do, giving the echidna my water when I may have needed the water to save the rest of the place. The really opposite extreme would have been the selfish thing, and I could have lit up the grass on the downhill upwind side of the echidna, knowing that the echidna would not be actually burnt, but it would smell the smoke and the flames and it would be terribly frightened and I'd get to see an echidna having a panic attack. Well, I tried the middle option. If you consider life along the axis where you've got selflessness moving towards the light doing good things, diametrically opposed to selfishness moving away from the light doing bad things, you had a geographical location axis and a time axis. I had the opportunity of doing the good thing and wetting that critter down. I had the opportunity of doing the bad thing and setting fire to it, and what I chose was to try and sit on the fence. Trouble is, the God theory that I subscribe to suggests that you can't sit on the fence. You've got to move towards the light or you've got to move away from the light. So, what unravelled after that particular cusp is that after talking to the frightened echidna down around here, I walked up and around and made sure that the whole fire was surrounded by a black ring and the wind was doing the right things and all of the fire fronts were moving and converging on the centre of that 25-acre patch. So, because my entire right side was soaked from shoulders to ankle, from bending over while wearing a backpack with a leaky lid, I came back to the hut, changed my clothes, packed my pipe, grabbed a beer, and I went back up, planning on standing here and watching. Okay, well, we'll leave the hut for a bit and wander up onto what I used to laughingly call the airfield, because I did in fact pay for it to be bulldozed, and a mate of mine did in fact take off and land up here once in a very specially designed short takeoff and landing, low speed, high climb rate style of an ultralight, which was designed for towing hang gliders at a time when the 1970s vintage hang glider pilot was too old and too fat and too out of condition to run around with a hang glider off mounted on his shoulders and jump off a cliff. Anyway, I'm going to pause and save a bit of film. Okay, so here I was about there, and I was about to walk out into that area, and the sun had gone down and the sky was still a bit light, and I'm just panning up to show that out there is where I decided, while drinking beer, that it would be a clever idea to go for a bit of a walk just after sundown, while most of the place was on fire, and what I planned on doing was just lighting up a few little patches that hadn't quite caught, you see. And it wasn't the brightest idea because I had no compass, I had no torch, I had no backpack, I had no water. But, you know, I sort of know this place and it's really only 100 acres, and I, bought it in 1990, it was 1998, I thought I knew it pretty good. Okay, so here I was in this little clearing here, And as I said, I was smoking and I was drinking and I was tired and I was pretty happy that I'd had a good little hazard reduction fire. And I got all of the outside edges of this little clearing alight so that it could join up with the rest of the fire. And that was when I realised that the sun had gone down completely and the sea breeze had come in and pushed up low cumulus clouds. So when I looked up, there were no stars. All I could see was the pink bottoms of the grey clouds reflecting the light from the fire that I had lit. And I was here in this clearing surrounded by a ring of fire, and it was taller than my head. And I had to work out fairly quickly which was the thinnest part of the fire and where to go and jump. And when I did that, I was then out in the blackness with no reference points, and I was completely lost. And it wasn't until after maybe half an hour, perhaps it was less, maybe it was only 10 minutes, and it felt like half an hour, but eventually I came across a tree which I recognised. Okay? And the tree was quite a way out that way. So I'll pause and I'll take you over there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 110, 111, 112, 113, 14, 15, 16, 117, 118, 119, 120, 21, 22, 123 yards away at night in the dark in a bushfire. And I come to this, which is, as you can see, the axe cut stump of a very large tree, the largest tree on the bit that I pay rates on. Okay, so this tree was cut down with an axe 150 years ago, and it's a single coppice which has extruded the stump. And when I found this tree by the glowing light of the fires that were all around me, that's when I knew where I was. And because I knew where I was able to walk out. Okay? And it wasn't far either. But with no references on rough country, in the middle of a fire at night, it's very easy to get bushed. And when I got back out where I could see, and I knew where I was, and I was back on the track, and I could find my way back to the hut, that's when I realised that I had just been treated to an absolutely perfect version of an echidna's view of a bushfire. Just like the echidna, which I had failed to wet down. Right? I had the opportunity and I could not be bothered. Okay? Now, here we are back on the road. Here I am, I know exactly where I am, and I was able to walk back to my place. But you know what? I honestly believe that my experience out there, nearly cooking myself in the dark, that was a consequence of my having tried to pick the middle road. If I had wetted down that echidna, I wouldn't needed to have experienced an echidna's view of the bush on fire at night. If I had have tried to scare the echidna, I reckon I would have cooked myself, to be quite honest. And I believe that every decision we make is a trifurcate cusp, exactly like that one. Yes, we do have free will, but there are consequences. And the Cosmic Scoreboard effect is lined up to give you 3 choices at least for every cusp that matters, because life is a learning curve. And the idea is that you live and you learn, or you don't live long. Ciao. Free will and the theory of cusps.